You're going to love the new residence, Mom. They have painting workshops. Veronica's smile was as fake as the pearls around her neck. Nathaniel nodded like an obedient schoolboy, while Adrian mentally counted the money they would make from selling my properties. I just smiled and said yes, that it sounded like a wonderful idea. But inside, something shattered for good. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of From. I want to know how far it's traveled, because this story is going to leave you speechless. They had chosen the private dining hall of the Grand Belmont Hotel, the most elegant hotel in the city, for this charade. The tablecloth was white linen, the crystal glasses reflected the golden evening light, and the aroma of roasted duck and truffle oil filled the air. Everything was perfect for an emotional execution, all calculated to look like a celebration when it was really my funeral and I was still alive. Mom, we know you've been a little confused lately. Nathaniel continued, his voice thick with a concern he didn't feel. He was wearing a tailored gray suit I had bought him for his graduation from Harvard. Now he was using it to bury me. Confused. That word stabbed me like a dagger. I had faked a few memory lapses to test their patience, their love. I wanted to see if my children would take care of me when I truly needed them. The answer was right in front of me, wearing the very emerald green dress I had gifted her. Dr. Miller says it would be for the best. Adrian lied, avoiding my gaze. A controlled environment, professional care activities designed especially for people your age. People my age. As if turning 72 had made me a different species, something that no longer deserved respect or dignity. As if a lifetime of building a real estate empire from scratch meant nothing. And the painting classes are really therapeutic, Veronica added, touching my hands with fingers that burned with falsehood. You can make portraits, vases, useful things. Useful things. While they were carving up my properties like vultures over a fresh kill, I would be sketching vases in a room that smelled of disinfectant and despair. When would the move be? I asked, keeping my voice as calm as a lake before a storm. Tomorrow, Nathaniel answered far too quickly. We've already made all the arrangements. You just need to sign a few papers. And what will happen to my properties? The silence that followed was so thick I could taste it. They looked at each other like children caught stealing from the cookie jar. Veronica cleared her throat, and Adrian fiddled with his napkin until it nearly tore. Don't you worry about that, Mom, Adrian finally said. We'll take care of everything. It's too much responsibility for you right now. Too much responsibility. The same properties I had bought, renovated, and managed for decades were suddenly too much for me. The same investments I had grown from an initial $5,000 to the $1.5 million I had now suddenly required younger minds. That night, I pretended to take the sleeping pills Veronica had given me. I spat them into a napkin when she wasn't looking. I needed to be wide awake for what was coming. At 11:00, I heard their voices in my kitchen. They thought I was sound asleep. A fatal mistake. The Mountain Lodge is worth at least $300,000. Nathaniel whispered, shuffling papers on my oak dining table, the table where I had signed my first real estate contract 40 years ago, and the downtown condo another $200,000. Adrian added, not to mention the investments in the bank. We have to act fast, Veronica murmured, pouring champagne into glasses I had given them for their anniversary. Before she realizes what's happening. Adrian laughed, that cruel laugh he had developed after marrying her. Realizes? Are you kidding? She asked me what day it was 3 times yesterday. A lie. I had feigned that confusion to test them to see how much of my own blood had turned to poison. The answer burned in my gut like acid. Look at this, Veronica said, waving a paper I recognized as my will. Once she's in the home, we can argue mental incompetence. The lawyer is already prepped. $400,000 for the main house. Nathaniel calculated, scribbling numbers in a notebook. $300 for the mountain lodge, $200 for the condo, and the investments add up to another $600, almost $1.5 million in total. $1.5 million, the fruit of a lifetime of work sacrifice and smart decisions. They had calculated it down to the last cent while I was supposedly sedated in my own bed. And the best part, Adrian added with a smile I could hear from my bedroom, is that she'll never know what all of this is really worth. She thinks it's just a few properties. They completely underestimated me. They thought I was a confused old woman who didn't understand numbers or business. They didn't know that every morning I reviewed my investments, that I knew the exact value of each property, that I had plans they couldn't even begin to imagine. At 5 in the morning, while they slept off their drunken betrayal, I got dressed in my best black pantsuit. I took only the essentials: my passport, the jewelry I had hidden in a secret box, and the key to a safe deposit box in a bank in another city. In that box were the documents that would change everything. The taxi arrived on time. The driver helped me with my small suitcase and asked no questions. At the airport, I bought a one-way ticket to Aspen, Colorado, where I owned a property they knew nothing about. During the flight, I closed my eyes and remembered my mother's words. Eleanor, never fully trust anyone, not even your own children. Blood can be corrupted, but dignity is eternal. She was right. And I was about to show them that a 72-year-old woman could be more dangerous than any enemy they had ever imagined. The plane landed in a city I hadn't visited in 30 years, Aspen. A name my children had never heard me speak because some stories are too precious to share with those who don't deserve them. The crisp mountain air hit my face like a slap of memories. This was where it had all begun. This was where I had bought my first cabin with the life savings from my job as a secretary. $5,000, that seemed like a fortune back then. $5,000 that had grown into the empire my children wanted to steal from me. The taxi drove me through streets I recognized despite the passage of time. The pine trees were still there, taller now, their branches whispering secrets to the wind. The old wooden homes maintained their rugged charm, though some had been renovated into soulless modern chalets. "Is this the right address, ma'am?" the driver asked, stopping in front of a log cabin with green shutters. "Looks like no one's lived here for a while." I smiled for the first time in days. "It's perfect." The cabin seemed to be sleeping, as if waiting for my return. It was small compared to the properties my children knew, but it had something none of the others possessed, a true history. It had been my secret refuge, my escape plan that I had kept quiet for decades. I took the keys from my purse. My hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from emotion. The door opened with a familiar creak like a welcoming sigh. The inside smelled of old wood and mountain air. The furniture was covered with white sheets, creating ghostly figures in the dim light. I walked slowly, removing the covers one by one, revealing treasures I had left there, like seeds waiting for the right moment to sprout. In the kitchen, I found the first surprise. On the table was a note written in a shaky but familiar hand. "Mrs. Whitmore, I've been waiting for you all these years. Agnes." My heart skipped a beat. Agnes Rowley had been my housekeeper for 15 years, until Nathaniel and Adrian decided we no longer needed her. "It's an unnecessary expense, Mom," they had said. "We can help you with the house." Another lie. They just wanted to control every aspect of my life, including who could or couldn't be near me. I heard footsteps on the front porch. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. The door opened slowly, and there she was. Agnes, 30 years older, her hair completely white, and her face etched with wrinkles that told stories of a life well lived, but with the same warm eyes I remembered. "I knew you'd come," she said simply, as if only days had passed instead of decades. "When I heard what your children were planning, I knew you'd find a way to get here." The door of the cabin groaned as it swung open, and there stood Agnes Rowley. Time had written its story on her face, but her eyes, those eyes still glowed with the loyalty I had always known. For a moment, all the weight I had carried seemed to fall away. The betrayal, the false smiles at the Grand Belmont Hotel, the whispering voices in my kitchen, it all faded beneath the warmth of one honest gaze. "I knew you'd come," Agnes said, her voice trembling but certain. I never doubted it, not for a single day. The words struck me like a lantern suddenly lit in a pitch-dark tunnel. Hope surged so powerfully it nearly buckled my knees. For months I had been drifting between suspicion and despair, feigning confusion to test my children, pretending weakness to measure their love. And when I discovered the truth, I feared that perhaps I had miscalculated, that my escape was too late, that I was already cornered by their greed. But now here was proof that not all bonds were broken. I stepped inside the cabin, welcoming me as though it had been holding its breath these 30 years. The scent of pine wood mingled with old paper and mountain air. The furniture draped in white sheets looked like silent witnesses to my return. Agnes closed the door behind us, her hands steady despite the tremor of age. "There is something you need to see," she said, leading me to the small office at the back of the cabin. The room was exactly as I had left it. Metal filing cabinets lined against the wall, a desk scarred by decades of work, and the safe embedded into the corner. "The combination," Agnes whispered, "is still Richard's birthday." My hand hovered over the dial, trembling not from weakness, but from memory. Richard. My late husband, my partner in every battle, my anchor. 10 years had passed since his death, and yet the thought of him was as alive as the day we met. Slowly, carefully, I turned the dial. The safe clicked open, releasing the scent of preserved paper and secrets long guarded. Inside, I found the deeds to properties hidden beyond my children's reach, investment accounts scattered across continents, and the carefully drafted will that reflected my true intentions. But there was something more. A sealed envelope, yellowed with time, tucked at the very back. My breath caught in my throat. On the front, in Richard's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "For Eleanor, when the storm comes." I pressed the letter to my chest before opening it. The paper crackled, and his voice seemed to echo as I read, "My dearest Eleanor, if you are holding this, then the storm we feared has arrived. You always said our children would one day need to choose between love and greed. If they choose greed, do not despair. You are stronger than you know. Remember this: money builds walls, but love builds legacies. Do not let them bury you alive. Fight, and when you win, create something greater than wealth. Create a refuge for women like you women who deserve dignity when the world would rather forget them. If you follow that dream, you will never be alone. I am with you always." The words blurred through my tears. Hope didn't just flicker, it exploded. It wasn't only my plan anymore. It was our plan, Richard's and mine. My children could scheme, but I carried a force greater than greed, the promise of a love that outlasted death. Agnes placed a hand on my shoulder. "I knew he had left you something. That letter has waited a long time." I nodded, unable to speak. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt not just cunning or prepared, I felt destined. We spent hours going through the documents. Agnes had cared for them as though they were relics, checking them monthly, ensuring no damp or dust could destroy them. Each deed, each certificate of stock, each notarized record was another weapon forged in secret, waiting for the moment of truth. The folder marked Hope Center lay at the heart of it all, thick with blueprints, permits, and financial reserves. It was no longer a dream scribbled in notebooks. It was real, ready, and waiting. "What about the lawyer?" I asked. Agnes smiled knowingly. "Mr. Blackwood has been waiting for your call. He knows everything. And he has something else." She handed me a small recorder, one I instantly recognized. My heart leapt. It was the device I had hidden in my house a year earlier when whispers of betrayal first began. On it were hours of recordings, Nathaniel's sigh of impatience, Adrian's laughter at my supposed senility, Veronica's cold declaration that I was just a stubborn old woman. Evidence. Ironclad, undeniable. When you face them, Agnes said, you won't just have words. You'll have the truth spoken from their own mouths. The power of it nearly overwhelmed me. A letter from Richard reminding me of my purpose. A trusted friend guarding my secrets. Evidence to crush their lies. It was as though every hidden piece of my life had waited for this exact hour. For the first time in months, I laughed. It startled Agnes, but soon she joined me. The sound wasn't bitter, it was bright, like bells ringing after a storm. That night, I didn't lie in bed trembling. I didn't fear the shadows. Instead, I spread the documents across the old wooden desk and plotted with Agnes as though we were generals before battle. We mapped the confrontation, the timing, the sequence of revelations. Every detail mattered. Outside, the Colorado wind howled through the pines, but inside the cabin, a fire burned steady, warm, invincible. When dawn came, I stepped outside with my coffee, inhaling the mountain air. The sun rose over the peaks, painting the snowcaps in gold. For the first time since the grand Belmont dinner, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like the hunter, patient and certain. The storm was coming, but Richard's words pulsed in my chest. You are stronger than you know. Fight. Create something greater than wealth. I whispered back to the wind, I will. And in that moment, my fear finally broke apart, replaced by a blazing certainty. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of my triumph. If you were in Eleanor's place, betrayed by your children, but holding the power to fight back, would you choose to forgive or to punish? Press 0 for forgive or 1 for punish. The morning after Richard's letter ignited my soul, Agnes and I drove down the winding Colorado roads to meet Henry Blackwood. The snow glittered on the mountain slopes like scattered diamonds, but inside me burned something hotter than any sun fury sharpened into purpose. Henry was waiting at a modest office in town, his gray suit immaculate, his expression carved in steel. When I entered, he rose and bowed his head slightly, as if greeting not just a client, but a commander returning to the field. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, his voice steady, I've been preparing for this day since you first confided your suspicions, and now I see the storm has broken. Yes, I replied, laying Richard's letter on the desk. And I intend to strike back with every weapon at my disposal. Henry opened his briefcase, revealing files neatly arranged, each tabbed with dates and witness names. Your children have underestimated you. They think this is a game of inheritance. They don't understand it's a matter of justice. Agnes placed the recorder on the desk, sliding it toward him. 3 hours of their voices, their greed, their schemes, their contempt for their own mother. Henry smiled grimly. This is dynamite in a courtroom, but I suspect you want more than legal proceedings. You want them broken, exposed, stripped of their illusions. He was right. My rage was not content with quiet victory. I wanted the world to see them for what they truly were. That afternoon, we drove back to the city. My house, the very fortress of my life, had been turned into enemy territory. Nathaniel's sleek BMW gleamed in the driveway, Adrian's white Mercedes parked beside it, and Veronica's expensive perfume already clung to the air like poison. I paused at the gate, my fists clenched. They think they've already buried me, I whispered. Today they learn I am very much alive. Henry and Agnes flanked me like generals at my side. Together we marched up the steps and rang the bell. The door opened. Veronica's face performed its usual masquerade surprise, fear, and then the polished smile. Eleanor, thank God, we've been so worried. Where have you been thinking? I said coldly, stepping past her without permission. In the living room, Nathaniel and Adrian sat at the dining table, papers spread out like a battlefield map. At the head of the table was a thin man with a mustache, Mr. Evans, their pliable lawyer. My brother Frederick stood awkwardly in the corner, his red truck visible through the window. When they saw me, their faces drained of color. Nathaniel rose, his voice shaky. Mother, we thought you thought I was helpless. I cut in my words, slicing like glass. You thought you could forge my future with your pens and lies. Adrian attempted a laugh. Mom, you're confused. We were only trying to protect you. Henry stepped forward. I am Henry Blackwood's specialist in elder fraud, and I assure you Mrs. Whitmore is not confused. In fact, she's sharper than every one of you combined. The air turned heavy silence, pressing down like a storm about to burst. Let's test this supposed confusion, I said, pulling out a folder. I know the main house is worth $600,000, the mountain lodge $450, the downtown condo $300, and the investments over $4 million. Total $5.2 million. Tell me. Nathaniel, does that sound like the math of a confused old woman? He opened his mouth, then closed it, his throat dry. I slammed Richard's letter on the table. Your father saw this storm coming. He told me to fight, and I will. He told me to create something greater than wealth, and I have. Henry pressed a button on the recorder. My children's voices filled the room like specters. Let's just hope she dies soon. We'll declare her incompetent. Then the money is ours. She's just a stubborn old woman. Every word was a blade slicing through their performance. Veronica buried her face in her hands. Adrian stammered, and Nathaniel clutched the back of a chair as though it might save him from drowning. Frederick muttered, Good God, what have you dragged me into? The fury inside me erupted not as a scream, but as a cold, merciless calm. You plotted to bury me alive in a nursing home while you toasted to my death in my kitchen. But you forgot one thing. I am Eleanor Whitmore. I built an empire from nothing, and I will bury your greed beneath the weight of truth. Here's the new element. Henry revealed he had secured a journalist and investigative reporter from a national magazine who had agreed to cover the story if Eleanor chose to go public. Your case, Henry explained, is more than personal. It is a symbol. Across this country, too many families discard their elders plotting over inheritances as if lives were bank accounts. If you want Eleanor, we can shine a light so bright it will blind them. The thought electrified me. My rage wasn't just for me anymore. It was for every woman whispered away into homes, for every life dismissed as expired. Adrian slammed his fist on the table. You can't do this. You'll ruin us. You ruined yourselves, I replied. And now the world will know. You wanted an easy fortune. Instead, your names will become a lesson told in every circle of betrayal. Henry leaned in. Some might even call this the greatest of all Reddit revenge stories. I caught the phrase and smiled. Yes, it was bigger than us now. A tale not just of greed, but of retribution so sharp it would echo beyond this room. Mr. Evans tried to slip away, but Henry blocked him. Forgery, conspiracy, elder abuse. Shall I list the charges? Veronica whispered. Please, Eleanor, don't destroy us. I looked at her, my eyes steady. Destroy you? No. I will do something far worse. I will make you face yourselves. Then I announced the sentence: 5 years. At the Hope Center, manual labor service humility, earn back what you squandered, or face prison bankruptcy and disgrace. The room shook with silence. Nathaniel's face twisted in rage. Adrian's jaw clenched. Veronica sobbed. Frederick looked at me with something close to awe. This isn't justice. Adrian spat. It's better, I replied. It's redemption offered by the woman you betrayed. Henry placed the real will on the table. This document is sealed, notarized, and unbreakable. If they refuse Eleanor, I file criminal charges by tomorrow morning. I nodded. Then the choice is theirs: freedom through service or destruction through law. The storm had broken. Justice was no longer a whisper. It was a thunderclap. As I left the room, my children sat frozen in their own disgrace. I felt Richard's words in my heart, echoing louder than ever. Money builds walls, but love builds legacies. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for every story of betrayal that deserved justice. Because sometimes the most unforgettable Reddit revenge stories are not found online. They are lived in blood, in truth, in fury. The air inside my house felt like a storm cloud about to split open. My children sat frozen, their faces pale from the evidence Henry had unleashed, but the real judgment had not yet begun. I stood at the head of the table, looking at them, not as strangers, not as enemies, but as my own flesh and blood. The betrayal cut so deep that anger alone could not describe it. It was sorrow, set on fire. "You have left me no choice," I said, my voice trembling with force. "Justice must be delivered, and it will be delivered by my own hand." Nathaniel swallowed hard. "Mother, please, silence," I thundered. My words cracked like a whip. "For years I poured my life into you. For years I built an empire so that you would never know hunger, never know the cold. And this is how you repay me, by scheming over my grave before I am even in it." Veronica wept openly, mascara streaking her cheeks. Adrian stared at the floor, too ashamed or too arrogant to meet my eyes. Henry placed another folder on the table. "There is more," he said. Agnes nodded and reached into her handbag. She pulled out a small black box, dusty with time. My breath caught. I knew that box, Richard's video diary. He had recorded messages in the final years of his life, but I had never shown them to the children. Perhaps I had been too protective, too unwilling to share his most vulnerable words. But now it was time. Agnes set the box gently in front of me. "He wanted them to see this when the day came," she whispered. With shaking hands, I pressed play. The screen flickered to life, showing Richard thin but strong, sitting in his favorite chair. His voice was weaker than I remembered, but the steel of his character still shone through. "My children," he began, looking directly into the camera, "if you are watching this, then something has gone terribly wrong. I raised you to be honorable, to cherish your mother, to protect the legacy we built together. But if you are here, if this moment has arrived, then you have betrayed all of it." Nathaniel gasped. Adrian's face drained of color. Richard continued, "Your mother is stronger than any of you can imagine. If you have chosen greed over love, then know this: she will outwit you. She will stand taller than you thought possible, and she will pass judgment, because she carries not just her strength, but mine." Tears blurred my eyes, but I let the video run. "I forgive you," Richard said softly, "because love does not vanish even in betrayal, but forgiveness does not erase consequences. If you want redemption, you must earn it. If not, you will lose everything." The screen went black. The silence that followed was unbearable, filled only by the sound of my children's shallow breaths. The weight of their father's words crushed them far more than my fury ever could. I placed both hands on the table, leaning forward. "Do you hear him? Your father's voice still rings from the grave. He forgave you, but he demanded consequences, and so will I." Adrian broke first. "Mother, I'm sorry. I didn't think you didn't think, because you didn't care." I snapped. "You laughed at me, plotted my confinement, counted my money as if I were already dead. And Nathaniel, you the one I thought most responsible, how quickly you sold your soul for numbers on a page." Nathaniel bowed his head, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I failed you. Yes, I said, my heart heavy. You all failed me. But I am not here to destroy you. I am here to strip away your lies and force you to face yourselves." I raised Richard's letter high. 5 years. At the Hope Center. Serving the elderly, carrying bricks, washing floors, feeding those you once would have ignored. That is my sentence for you. Refuse, and you face prison, disgrace, and poverty. Veronica sobbed harder. "Eleanor, please, I'll do anything, then do it," I said firmly. 5 years, nothing less. Henry placed the signed documents in front of them. "Your choice is simple: sign or face charges that will haunt you forever." The pen trembled in Nathaniel's hand as he signed. Adrian followed, jaw-clenched fury and shame battling in his eyes. Veronica's hand shook so badly that her signature was barely legible. When the last line was signed, I felt the thunder roll through me. This was not vengeance alone. It was justice infused with sorrow. It was punishment, but it was wrapped in the love of a mother who still longed for redemption. I looked at them and whispered, "I still love you. But love without discipline is poison. This is your cure." That night, I sat in the quiet of my cabin, Richard's video diary replaying in my mind. His forgiveness burned brighter than my rage. His command for consequences gave me strength. For the first time, I understood that this was not just my story. It was a story shared by countless families where betrayal and redemption dance a fragile line. Some of these stories remain hidden, whispered in the shadows of homes. Others are shared openly, as in the many Reddit family tales that echo the same heartbreak and hope. My own story, though more dramatic, was just another testament to a truth older than time. Betrayal can destroy, but judgment can rebuild. And perhaps one day when others read about this, my family's mistakes would serve as a warning, as living proof that greed burns bridges and only humility rebuilds them. That, too, would be part of our legacy, because even in the most painful Reddit family tales, there is always a choice: remain broken or rise transformed. As dawn broke, I whispered to Richard's memory, "I gave them judgment as you asked. Now may they find redemption as we prayed." The ink was barely dry on the papers my children had signed when the sentence began. 5 years of servitude at the Hope Center. 5 years to test whether their hearts could be remade. The next morning, Nathaniel, Adrian, and Veronica arrived at the construction site. Their designer shoes and tailored clothes had been exchanged for work boots, hard hats, and gloves. Yet even dressed like laborers, they stood out. Their posture carried arrogance. Their eyes flickered with resentment. Mike the foreman wasted no time. Pick up those stones. Carry them to the other side of the site, piece by piece. The pile of rubble looked endless, a mountain of jagged concrete and twisted metal. Nathaniel bent to lift a stone and winced immediately. Adrian tried to carry too much at once, nearly dropping it on his foot. Veronica's manicured hands blistered within an hour. By noon, their clothes were filthy, their bodies drenched in sweat, their tempers fraying. I watched from a distance, my heart a battlefield of emotions. This was justice, yes, but it was also agony to watch my own flesh and blood broken down, humbled so publicly. That first week was nothing short of hell. The work was relentless, shoveling, hauling, sorting. Their muscles ached, their skin burned under the sun, their spirits sagged with each passing hour. Adrian muttered curses under his breath. Veronica cried when no one was looking. Nathaniel nursed blisters that oozed and bled. Yet I knew this was only the beginning. They had to taste the bitterness of toil before they could ever understand the sweetness of redemption. On the 7th day, a new complication arrived. A young journalist named Clara Jensen appeared at the site, notepad in hand. Word had spread through town the wealthy Whitmore children had been sentenced by their own mother to 5 years of labor. Clara's editor thought it too bizarre to ignore. She approached me politely. "Mrs. Whitmore, may I write about this?" "People are curious." I hesitated. Public attention could wound my children further, but it could also hold them accountable. Shame, when faced honestly, can be a forge. Write the truth, I told her, not gossip. Show what greed does to a family and what work might do to heal it. Her first article appeared 2 days later. The Whitmore redemption from boardrooms to brick piles. The piece spread quickly. Strangers began to visit the site, curious to see the fallen heirs forced into sweat and dust. Some came to jeer others, to quietly cheer them on. The humiliation was unbearable for Nathaniel. "Mother, this is cruelty," he spat one evening, his face streaked with dirt. "We can't even work without people watching us like animals in a cage. You chose this," I reminded him, my voice steady. "Better shame now than prison later. Better to be judged in daylight than rot in a cell." Adrian, though exhausted, surprised me. "Maybe it's what we deserve," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. It was the first crack in his wall of arrogance. The weeks rolled on. Their bodies hardened, but their pride softened. The The blisters on Veronica's hands turned to calluses. Nathaniel no longer groaned at every task, though his eyes carried a deep weariness. Adrian stopped competing and began pacing himself, working steadily, rather than rushing. Still, there were moments of collapse. I remember one afternoon when Veronica sank to the ground, sobbing, her hands trembling. "I can't do this, Eleanor. I was never built for this kind of life." I crouched beside her, touched her shoulder. Neither was I once, but life built me, and now it must build you. Her tears slowed. She rose again, picked up a stone, and carried it, one step at a time. By the third month, Clara's articles had taken on a different tone. The first had been about scandal, the second about shame, the third about change. Though the Whitmore children began their sentence with bitterness, she wrote signs of transformation appear. Adrian now volunteers extra time helping older workers. Veronica suggested a system to organize materials more efficiently. Nathaniel, once the proudest, has been seen sharing his lunch with fellow laborers. Reading those words, I felt something stir inside me. Was it hope? Perhaps the faintest spark. But I was not yet convinced. Change in print is easy. Change in the soul is harder. One evening, as the sun set behind the half-built Hope Center, Adrian approached me. His face was gaunt, his hands rough. "Mother, may I ask you something?" "Yes," I said cautiously. Do you think Father would be proud of us or ashamed?" The question pierced me. It was not defiance. It was not anger. It was raw yearning. "He would be proud," I whispered, "if you finish this, if you rise from greed into service. He would be proud if you become men and women who give instead of take." Adrian nodded, eyes wet, and walked away. It was the first time in years he had asked, not about money, not about inheritance, but about pride. Still, the road was brutal. Every day they returned home aching, filthy, barely able to stand. Their bodies bent, but their souls began just barely to straighten. I kept Richard's video diary by my side. At night, when doubts crept in, I replayed his voice. "Forgiveness does not erase consequences. If you want redemption, you must earn it." And so day by day, brick by brick, they earned it. By the end of those first grueling months, the Hope Center's walls began to rise, and so did the faint possibility that my children's hearts might be rebuilt. They had endured their first taste of hell, and though exhaustion clung to them like chains, I glimpsed tiny sparks of something new. Not yet redemption, but perhaps the beginning of it. Winter thawed into spring, and the Hope Center rose from the soil like a miracle in progress. Its walls stood tall now beams, steady windows reflecting the morning sun. My children had poured sweat into every brick, every stone. But something more important than the building was changing their hearts. It happened slowly at first, like dawn, stretching pale fingers across a dark sky. Adrian no longer cursed under his breath. Nathaniel stopped keeping count of every hour, every task. Veronica began to ask questions not about herself, but about the women who would one day live here. Still, I wondered, was this change real, or just another mask they wore until freedom returned? The answer began to unfold one unforgettable evening. The center was not yet finished, but the cafeteria hall had been completed early to host a special event, storytelling night. Agnes had suggested it, her eyes sparkling. "Let them hear the truth," she said. "Let them sit among the women this place is meant for." And so we invited 20 elderly women from the community women who had suffered neglect, abandonment, and loss. Some had been left at hospitals, some cast aside by children, too busy or too selfish to care. The hall was filled with folding chairs and the aroma of fresh soup. My children sat uneasily in the back, their work clothes still stained from the day. Clara Jensen, the journalist, attended too, notebook ready. She had followed every chapter of this strange saga, but tonight her pen seemed almost reverent, as though she knew she was recording history. The first woman to speak was Maria, 82, her voice soft but steady. "My son put me in a nursing home because his wife didn't want me around. He sold my house without asking. I haven't spoken to him in 10 years. The words struck like stones in the silence. Veronica's eyes glistened as Maria described birthdays, forgotten holidays spent alone. Next came Ruth, who had raised 7 children. They said I was too expensive, that my medicines cost too much. They left me at a county hospital. I remember clutching my handbag like it was my last friend. Nathaniel bowed his head. His hands, once ink-stained from contracts, were now calloused from labor, but tonight they trembled as he covered his face. One by one, the women told their stories, fragments of broken lives, scattered dreams, wounds that still bled beneath wrinkled skin. And then it happened. Adrian stood up. His voice cracked, raw and unpolished. "I need to say something," he began. All eyes turned to him. "My mother gave us everything, and we nearly threw her away just like your families did to you." He swallowed hard. "I thought I deserved her money. I thought she was weak, confused, a burden. But I was wrong. I was blind. Hearing you, I realize we are no better than the ones who hurt you." The silence deepened. For once, Adrian wasn't performing. He wasn't bargaining. His words burned with sincerity. He turned to me, tears streaking through the dirt on his face. "Mother, I don't know if you can ever forgive us, but tonight I understand. We weren't just greedy, we were cruel, and I don't want to be that man anymore." Veronica rose next, her voice shaking. When Maria spoke, I saw myself. I would have been the daughter-in-law who pushed her away. I despised your strength, Eleanor, because it made me feel small. But tonight I saw true strength. It's in these women. It's in you. And maybe it can be in me if I let it. Finally, Nathaniel stood. He was the tallest, the proudest once, but tonight he looked like a penitent soldier. "I betrayed your trust," he admitted. "I thought I was clever, planning like a general. But I see now I was planning my own ruin. If redemption is possible, it begins here with humility and with service." The room seemed to exhale as if everyone present had been holding their breath. The storm that had brewed for months broke open not with thunder, but with fragile rays of light. When the women applauded, it was not polite clapping. It was the applause of souls recognizing change. Clara wiped her eyes as she scribbled notes. Agnes beamed like a proud sentinel. I sat frozen, my heart swelling with emotions I had not dared to feel. For months, I had held to judgment, to discipline, to consequence. But tonight, something new unfolded before me. The dam of anger inside me cracked, and forgiveness poured through like a flood. I stood, my hands trembling. "You have spoken truth tonight," I said, my voice quivering with both pain and pride. "For the first time, I believe you mean it. For the first time, I see not just exhaustion, not just shame, but sincerity." I stepped forward and placed my hands on each of their shoulders. "You are still my children. And though my heart was shattered tonight, I feel it beginning to mend." Tears streamed freely now, not just from them, but from me. We embraced not as judge and guilty, not as jailer and prisoners, but as a family teetering on the edge of rebirth. Later that evening, as we cleaned the hall, Agnes whispered, "Did you see it?" "The light in their eyes, yes," I whispered back. For the first time in years, I dared to hope. Tonight felt like sunrise after a long, merciless storm. Clara's article the next day was titled, "From Betrayal to Awakening, the Whitmore Children Speak." It wasn't about scandal anymore. It was about transformation. The public began to shift, no longer jeering but cautiously admiring. But more importantly, I shifted. For months, my heart had been armored with steel. Tonight, I allowed it to soften. Tonight, I began to believe that redemption was not only possible, but within reach. The hell of labor had broken them. But tonight, the fire of sincerity began to rebuild them. Like dawn breaking after storm clouds, forgiveness lit the path ahead. If someone betrayed you deeply, would you believe in their change if they showed true sincerity? Or would you always doubt, press 0 for believe, or 1 for doubt? The morning after storytelling night, I woke with a calmness that had eluded me for years. The storm inside me had finally broken. Where there had once been bitterness and suspicion, there was now serenity, radiant, undeniable. I walked through the nearly finished Hope Center gardens, the dew shining like diamonds on each blade of grass. I thought of Richard's words in that old video, "Forgiveness does not erase consequences. If you want redemption, you must earn it." My children had begun to earn it. And in their sincerity, I felt a pride that burned brighter than anger ever had. Nathaniel was already in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, learning how to bake bread for the residents. Adrian was in the exercise yard, guiding one of the elderly women through simple stretches, his patience startling even himself. Veronica was sweeping the entryway, humming softly, her eyes brighter than I had ever seen. They weren't just serving anymore. They were belonging. The completion of the Hope Center felt like watching a dream take human form. The walls no longer whispered of betrayal, but sang of resilience. Flowers bloomed in the gardens, windows gleamed, and the laughter of elderly women echoed through hallways designed for dignity rather than despair. One evening, we held an official opening ceremony. Local leaders attended. Clara Jensen reported live, and the first group of residents moved in with tears of gratitude. Watching them step into their new apartments, each decorated with warmth, not sterility, I felt the weight of years lift from my shoulders. Nathaniel gave a short speech, his voice steady. "This building is not just bricks and wood. It is a testament that mistakes can be mended, that families can rebuild." Adrian added, "I used to think strength was about control. Now I know true strength is lifting others." And Veronica, once so shallow, concluded with trembling sincerity, "We came here as prisoners of our own greed. Today we stand as servants of hope." The applause was thunderous, not for their eloquence, but for the truth that had reshaped them. Months later, Henry Blackwood sat in my office with papers stacked high. "Eleanor," he said with pride, "the board has approved funding for 5 additional centers across the country. Your legacy won't be contained here. It will spread city by city, state by state." I closed my eyes, overcome. At 76, I had thought my story was ending. Instead, it was multiplying. My betrayal had birthed not despair, but a movement. Richard's dream and mine had fused into something larger, a constellation of hope across the nation. For those listening now, especially those between 40 and 70, you know what it means to carry both scars and wisdom. Betrayal can come even from those closest to you, but betrayal is not the final word. The final word is what you do with it. You can let it destroy you, or you can turn it into a legacy that shines beyond your own life. My children betrayed me, yes. They plotted against me, tried to bury me alive in the name of convenience and greed. But by holding them accountable, by demanding they face consequence and labor, I gave them the chance to rise. And they did. That is the life lesson I leave you with. Justice and love are not enemies. Justice makes love real, and love makes justice redemptive. One afternoon, I stood by the rose garden. Mercedes, one of the residents, leaned on Adrian's arm, walking 10 steps on her own, her eyes sparkling. Veronica sat with another woman, painting her nails, both of them laughing. Nathaniel read financial documents aloud to a nearly blind resident, helping her understand her modest pension. I watched them with tears of fierce pride, not because they were perfect, not because they had erased the past, but because they had chosen to become something new. The pride of a mother is not measured in the wealth her children inherit, but in the values they embody. Mine had finally become men and women worthy of respect. One night, I walked outside after dinner, the sky blazing with stars. I thought of Richard again. The real legacy is not a monument. It's a map. Yes, a map. One we had drawn together through fire and storm, through betrayal and rebirth. A map that would lead others from despair to dignity, from greed to generosity. And as I gazed at the starlight, I realized something simple and profound, my life, my pain, my triumphs. They were now part of something eternal. To you, my listener, thank you for walking this journey with me. Thank you for holding space for the pain, for the fury, and now for the radiant peace that follows. My story may be dramatic, but it carries a message every soul must hear. No one is too old to change. No betrayal is too deep to heal, and no life is too small to leave behind a blazing legacy. So I ask you now, if this story stirred something in your heart, let me know. Subscribe to hear more stories of justice and redemption. Leave a comment and tell me, do you believe redemption is possible even after betrayal? And please watch the next video. Each story builds on the last, weaving a community of listeners who believe in dignity, hope, and the power of second chances. Because together, we aren't just telling stories, we are building legacies. Auntie May 365 Voice, and I'll see you in the next video.